You ready? Well, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be joined by Demetrios Nicolaides, the Minister of Education and Childcare, for today's announcement. I'd also like to recognize our important guests. We have Joanne Pittman, who is the Chief Superintendent of the Calgary Board of Education, Lynette Anderson, Chief Superintendent of Edmonton Catholic Schools, and Nicole Buchanan, Trustee and Board Chair of Red Deer Public School Board. We have had a challenging start to the 25-26 school year. It's been a difficult beginning for everyone, including students and parents and teachers. And I know it's been a difficult time for teachers and educational assistants. And I do want to thank you for welcoming students back into your classrooms, back to their routines, and back to their education. We recognize that while classes resume, there are issues that remain, and we hear loud and clear from both teachers and parents your concerns about the complexity and size of your classrooms. These issues create challenges for teachers and educational assistants as well as students, and we want to work with you to deal with them head on. That's why I'm here with Minister Nicolaides to announce the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee. This 11-person task force will be co-chaired by myself and Minister Demetrios Nicolaides and includes representatives from government, school boards, and the Alberta Teachers Association. We're here to listen. We're here to work with you to chart a new path forward. And we're here to take action. This is not just another working group or panel. This is a committee ready to make decisions and implement change immediately and with urgency. We have modeled the committee similarly to the Edmonton Public Safety Cabinet Committee, which was appointed in January of 2024, who within weeks had created and opened the Navigation Centre in Edmonton and supported Edmonton Police in the removal of encampments across downtown Edmonton, connecting those in need with life-changing services. We saw rapid and successful results with that model, and we are ready to come at this issue with the same openness and willingness to be innovative and find new solutions to complex problems. Our work begins immediately, and it's threefold. First, throughout November, Alberta's government will continue working with school boards to collect data on class sizes and composition. That data will help us set the criteria to guide the Minister of Education and Childcare in allocating resources to classrooms and to inform our work to reduce complexity and address classroom disruptions. Over the coming months, the Cabinet Committee will also hear from school boards and educators, educational assistants, complex needs specialists, parents and others to gather the feedback that we need to make effective decisions about funding and targeting resources. That work includes hiring 3,000 new teachers and 1,500 educational assistants over the next 3 years. It will also support the advancement of our government's commitment to invest $8.6 billion to build 130 new schools and provide over 100 modular classrooms in the growing communities that need them urgently. Second, we will be acting on recommendations from the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team established in June. The team has completed their report that includes recommendations to reduce disruptions in the classroom and strengthen supports for students and educators. And we'll be releasing the report in the coming weeks, and we'll begin implementing those recommendations immediately. I want to reiterate that we are deeply committed to making real and meaningful change for the students and teachers in our classroom. Solving these challenges will not be a simple task, but I have every reason to believe that we will find solutions, and we will only do so by working together with teachers and educational assistants for students and for a public education system that is not only the best in the world, but enables every student to learn, grow, and pursue their dreams. Now I'd like to invite Minister Nicolaides to say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Premier, and good morning, everyone. In the last 3 years, over 80,000 new students have joined our schools. This means our classrooms are bigger and more complex than ever before. Class size and classroom complexity are the biggest problems in our education system today. The development of this new Cabinet Committee shows our government is serious about fixing these problems. We want to find the right solutions for Alberta, and we are ready and willing to do the work. Building on the Premier's comments, I will explain a little bit more about what the committee will do and how we plan to work together to get results for Alberta. And I want to provide a clear message to all Albertans. We will deliver the results that you expect. First, I want to provide a little bit more information about the dramatic increase in student population, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how the committee will achieve its goals. Over the past few years, Alberta's population has increased dramatically. 2023 was a record-breaking year, and our province saw the largest single-year growth ever recorded. This influx of new people came fast and furious. This came at a time when some school boards were looking at eliminating and reducing spaces. I know in Calgary, they were looking at reducing spaces, and other school divisions as well were looking to reduce spaces due to underutilization, both in Calgary, in Edmonton, and in other corners of the province. In 2022, Alberta's population increased in a measured and comfortable pace. However, by 2024, our population exploded. The number of new Canadians jumped from 59,000 in 2022 to over 150,000 in 2024, a 159% increase in just 2 short years. In the same 2 years, the number of people coming from other provinces increased to over 48,000. There was absolutely no way the province could absorb so many people in such a short time. Housing prices increased and naturally schools filled up like we've never seen. These new students also came with increased complexity. We saw, for example, a 34% increase in the number of refugee students. And today, students who speak English as a second language represent 31% of Calgary public education system's entire population, which equates to 44,000 students. Now, let me be clear. Alberta is a place of opportunity, and we welcome everyone into our province so they can enjoy the Alberta advantage. The influx of new people means that people see promise in our remarkable province. But opening the doors to this many people over a short amount of time has brought our education system to the brink. But our government will step up and address these challenges responsibly. Some of the steps we have taken to date to meet these challenges include, as the Premier mentioned, an $8.6 billion commitment to build more than 130 new schools. It included the creation of the Classroom Complexity Grant in 2023. It included a 10% increase in education funding over the last 2 years, and more. And today we're taking another step with the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee. This committee will include the Premier and I, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, the Minister of Assisted Living and Social Services, and the Minister of Child and Family Services. Non-voting members of the committee will include the superintendents of Edmonton Catholic Schools and Calgary Public, the President of the College of Alberta Superintendent, Dr. Corsi from the Alberta Teachers Association, and others. The committee will also invite other participants as needed to leverage their expertise and views. And I want to be clear, as the Premier has noted, the priority of this committee is to make decisions quickly. This committee will not spend months just to provide recommendations. The time for recommendations has passed, and the time for actions is now. More specifically, the committee will work to set rules for tracking and reporting class size and classroom makeup, invest $300 million over the next 3 years. That will include hiring 1,500 EAs, hire 3,000 teachers where they are needed the most, create a new policy for inclusive education, and implement the recommendations of the Aggression and Complexity Action Team, and as well give advice on adding modular classrooms and special spaces. I'm also pleased to announce today as well the creation of a Teacher Advisory Council. Teachers are at the heart of our schools. Their ideas and experiences help us make good decisions about class size and classroom complexity. The Advisory Council will work directly with the Minister of Education and Childcare to share teachers' voices and to ensure that they're elevated to the highest level. The Council will operate continuously for the next 2 years and meet regularly to talk about what is happening in our classrooms and to provide more details about what teachers need. The Council will provide critical, on-the-ground perspective directly from the front lines of our education system. This perspective is invaluable for developing and refining policies that are effective, practical, and truly support student learning. This will create a new level of communication with our teachers so that we can work together to address the challenges our education system is facing. More details about the Advisory Council will be released soon. But because of the steps we have outlined here today, I am confident we will deliver the results that Albertans expect. In closing, I ask you to visit the Government of Alberta website to learn more about these important steps. Thank you. And I'm pleased to invite Nicole Buchanan, Chair of Red Deer Public Schools, to provide her comments.
Thank you, Premier and Minister. I am honoured to stand with you today as we take action to support Alberta's schools. Our classrooms in Alberta are growing and changing. With more students and greater diversity, teachers face new challenges every single day. As a school board trustee, the creation of this class size and complexity cabinet committee is a major step forward for students, teachers, and families across our province. With over 17 years working as a police officer, some of those spent as a school resource officer, I've learned this. When people feel heard, they feel valued, and that's when real solutions start to take root. That's why this committee is responding by listening to teachers, school boards, and education partners, making sure their voices guide our decisions. By collecting data on class sizes and classroom needs, this cabinet committee will help direct support to schools that need it the most. The committee will also use expert advice, including recommendations from the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team to guide new policies and solutions. As a mom of 2 school-age students who each have their own individualized plans, I know this means more educational assistance in classrooms, more help for students with special needs, and better conditions for learning. Together, we are making sure Alberta's schools have the support they need for every single student to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to our speakers. Now we'll head into the media Q&A portion of the announcement. We'll start off with questions in the room here at the mic before making our way to the phones. A reminder to state your name and outlet, and we'll be taking one question, one follow-up. We'll go ahead to our first at the mic.
Okay, hi. Hello, can everyone hear me? Premier, Minister? Okay, great, thank you. This is for the Premier, please.
Okay.
Premier Smith.
And your name and outlet, sorry?
Oh, sorry, Ted Henley from CBC here in Calgary. I'm just trying to figure out what's new here regarding the need to study classroom complexity issues. The needs have been loud and clear for decades from teachers, even going back to the O2 strike here in the city of Calgary. And they've been talking about very similar issues regarding classroom sizes, need for more teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And so what's new with this committee here? Haven't we looked and known about this issue for a while now?
Well, as the minister said, when we came out of COVID, we were actually on the cusp of having our major school boards talking about school closures, reducing class sizes, reducing school spaces. I think I saw in his notes it was 14,000 school spaces that were set to be eliminated in 2022. So that was the trajectory we were on, that we had stagnant growth for a number of reasons. And I think it took everybody by surprise that we ended up with such a surge in population nationally. It wasn't just Alberta that experienced it, but it added 80,000 additional students a net to the classroom. So it's a whole other level of complexity, especially as many of those students come from war-torn countries. So there's trauma issues, there's potential lags in where they should be at in terms of their education because of disruption. There's English language learning needs. So I think it's the acute pressure that came into the system with the extraordinary immigration policies that we saw over the last 3 years. Normally, we had immigration policies where you'd expect about 300 to 400,000 people a year coming into the country. They went to 2 million per year for 3 years. So that's what I think has been extraordinary and different. We've had quite a bit of success in developing cabinet committees. We've had them for a number of different reasons. I mentioned the cabinet committee with the encampment removal in Edmonton, which also incidentally led to navigation centres in Edmonton, in Calgary as well. We have had cabinet committees every time we end up having to go into the hazard season. So we've had to establish emergency management meetings of cabinet to make decisions as we're dealing with fires. We've had to develop 2 different recovery task forces, cabinet committees as well, to deal with the recoveries from some of the devastation that happened in 2 of those fire seasons. We have also developed a cabinet committee right now to address the very serious issues in Royal Alex with alternative level of care patients. And part of the uniqueness about this approach is it allows for us to have all of the cabinet ministers who are impacted or could potentially provide resources to solve a problem at the table, but we also swear in the members so that they can also share in confidential information and give us confidential advice. So we've had, as I mentioned, 6 or 7 times that we've tried this type of approach. It allows for us to make decisions quickly, deploy dollars quickly, and then also has the direct line of sight back into cabinet if any additional funding decisions need to be made. So those would be the things that I would say are different this time.
Okay, thank you, Premier. And as a follow-up, you're talking about the success of committees and that type of thing. Why and you mentioned that, some superintendents are going to be part of this advisory committee. I believe it was non-voting, giving input at least. Why not have teachers there as part of this committee then, instead of setting up this separate teacher advisory council?
Well, we will have teachers there. I think we have to remember that Alberta is the funding partner for education. We have always had a decentralized model. So we've got now 61 different school boards that are public, separate, or francophone. And the approach we've taken in the past has been to provide allocations of dollars based on formulas and then leave it to the school boards to be able to decide, do they want teachers, do they want education assistants? I think because of the acute pressure that we're facing in a number of different communities, not all of them, I think what we determined is that they need help from different departments. So, for instance, we started rolling out CASA mental health classrooms, so to deal with issues of anxiety and mental health. And so those are dollars that exist over in mental health and addiction. So Rick Wilson's going to be at the table. We also know that Children and Family Services, Cyril Turton asked if he could be on this committee as well, because he's got some very, very high needs clients that are in the children's services system, and we want to make sure that they get seamless support, whether they're in home or in the classroom. Who else am I missing? Mental health.
Alberta Teachers Association.
Well, yeah. So I'm just sorry. The other cabinet minister. Oh, and Jason Nixon, of course. Jason Nixon. Well, one of the things that, as we were talking through this issue, we realized that there's about $1.5 billion being spent in education on special needs students. But Jason Nixon has a $1.5 billion budget as well, also dealing with young people with special needs. And so we're bringing really all of the resources across multiple ministries to bear on this. And I hope that we'll be able to end up with some collaborations and sharings and new ideas that will come from that. We do have a representative from the Alberta Teachers Association. I know the minister has been working with the ATA to identify an appropriate person. We're working with the education assistants. There's a couple of different associations that represent education assistants. So we'll be working to find a suitable someone who the union would suggest to participate in that. But the superintendents have to be there because they are the ones implementing policy across their entire division. And the trustees have to be there because they're the accountable level of government, and they're brand new. Many of these boards just got elected a few weeks ago, so they also need to be able to get the same information that we are, so that as we make the changes, as we develop new practices, everybody is recruited into ensuring that we have systems in place that will work. This isn't a one-time fix, as you know. When we enter into a school year, it's a whole different configuration of classrooms. And then in the new year, although there isn't that much movement, sometimes there's another whole new configuration of classes. And then once you finish the graduation and you start into a new year, you're back to the beginning again. So I look at this as a continuous improvement and a continuous approach that we're going to have to take to make sure that as we continue to face these pressures, that we have the resources there to take care of them. So we're in it for the long haul. And so we want to be able to put a committee structure, a cabinet committee structure in place that is going to be able to make decisions over multiple years.
Thank you.
Thanks. Did you want to say anything about your choice from the ATA?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on, of course, we do have a representative from the Alberta Teachers Association, but apart from individuals that are specifically represented, the committee will be reaching out to different stakeholder groups, organizations, individuals, inviting them to come in, share perspective, or if we have particular questions. So just because an individual or an organization is not specifically named as being on the committee does not limit our ability to be able to reach out to a wider audience. We intend to do that. The Teacher Advisory Advisory Council is a little separate, of course. I want to do this to make sure that I have the ability to engage directly with frontline teachers for any and all matters, irrespective of this cabinet committee. I want to bring them up to the highest possible level. And there may be, other policy items or initiatives that I want to get some perspective from teachers on and engage with, or even just listen to some of their views and thoughts. So that can be an ongoing, enduring body to bring our teachers right to the very top of conversation.
Have you established meetings yet for either committee?
Not yet. The Teachers Advisory Council will be, and I perhaps can do it here, inviting anyone who's interested. Now we're going to get flooded, but that's okay. Anyone who's interested to please provide us with details so we can populate that committee, and we'll be looking at a meeting date with the Cabinet Committee. I think we want to get going very quickly here. We haven't set an initial date, but I would anticipate within the next few weeks for our first meeting.
And we'll go to our
I will
next
say
mic
that,
after.
that the minister has sent out notification to the superintendents and the school boards that we need to deliver us the data that we're going to need by November the 24th. If you go online and look at the granular data that they have in British Columbia, they go classroom by classroom by classroom. It's literally probably 25,000 plus classrooms that we need to have a look at. And so the process we're going to go through is let's identify the ones that are over the class size recommendation that goes back all the way to the Learning Commission report. And then on top of that, let's do another lens of how many kids with complex learning needs are in those classrooms. Those will also be a high priority. And then the third one will be how many kids with English language learning needs are in those classrooms as well. So we need to get the holistic look at all the data so that we can start working through the most complex and most difficult situations that teachers and students find themselves in.
And we'll go to our next question, Mike. It's been 10 minutes.
He's new at this.
It's Stephanie Thomas from CTV News Calgary. My question is for you, Premier Smith. This is looking for reaction to the ATA's legal challenge. Would Peter Lougheed have used the notwithstanding clause?
I think he would have. When I look at what he said in response to a back to work legislation, he was quoted on record saying that if the courts ever affirmed a right to strike and prevented him from ordering his labor groups back to work, he would immediately convene the legislature to invoke the notwithstanding clause. You have to remember this right to strike is brand new and it's been written in by the judges in a 2015 decision. And so we were mindful of that decision. I'd encourage you to look at it. What it says is that you can't preemptively stop someone from striking. And if you do, you have to have a mechanism to be able to deal with their outstanding issues. That's what the 2015 decision was. So we didn't stop anyone from striking, but we did get to a point where we had to look at the balance of rights of students to an education and how that was being impacted. And we sadly have recent results from COVID that let us know that after 2 weeks, kids really lose momentum and you get learning loss. So we tried, we asked them to come back to the table for mediation. This is the kind of thing that we were proposing that we wanted to do because we know that it's a lot more complex than just issues that can be resolved at a single bargaining table. You have to bring in all of the different players that we've brought in, but also all of the different ministries. And so we hope that this is a show of good faith, that we were serious about finding a different way to address the complexity issue. And we'll see how the court process plays out.
Okay, my follow-up might be to either of you. It has more to do with today's news conference, but it's about the task force data. And once that's collected, how quickly will we see government implement changes? Does that possibly include, the special education classes to help deal with complexity?
Well, I can tell you we've been able to move very quickly. When we established the encampment task force, we were able to identify really quickly that we needed to set up a navigation center and all of the different services that were there. And we've literally helped thousands of people go through those centers. And it was so successful, we expanded it to Calgary. So those results we began to see within 2 months. With our approach with the Royal Alex, we had heard that there was a particular problem with alternative level of care patients that were in acute care beds. So we established that task force and we started looking at who was in those beds and we started moving them into more appropriate facilities. Like there were 80 people in our system that had been living in the hospital for 1,000 days or more. And so we started with that. And now there is no one living in hospital for 1,000 days or more. We still have a little more work to do on those who've been in hospital more than 300 days, but we are going to keep on working down. So that's why, because we've had some experience now, and again, that whole process began September 1st, and we're already at a point where several hundred alternative level of care patients have been moved into more appropriate facilities, which allows for those beds now to be returned to their intended use, which is acute care. And we're going to keep on going until we manage to have that process play out at every hospital. But that's why we have some confidence that this is the kind of approach. Start with the data, look at where the outliers are, and get the resources there so that you can address it quickly. So I think you'll be seeing action in a matter of weeks, not months.
Premier, Bill Graveland from Canadian Press. Yeah. Earlier this week, when you were asked about the recall petitions, you indicated that you would deal with it once they're filed. What kind of options are you looking at? Well,
I can tell you there's some things that we're concerned about. We're concerned that some of the laws that are out there appear to have been broken because you're not supposed to be doing GoFundMes. And part of the reason for that is you need to be able to trace every dollar that comes in to fund political parties so that there isn't foreign interference. So we're a bit concerned about that. We're concerned about busing in because the rules also say that these are supposed to be local campaigns driven by local concerns. So that concerns us. And we're also concerned that there doesn't seem to be fair process for our those who have a recall petition that has been affirmed. They haven't heard from the elections official. They haven't been verified that they can start their own fundraising and their own campaigning. And so these are some process issues, maybe issues that had been overlooked in previous development of the law. And sometimes when you find problems, you have to solve them. So those would be the kind of things that we're looking at. Are there some areas that we have to be able to modify just to create some procedural fairness and ensure everybody's following the law?
Is there any chance that some of the petitions could be invalidated?
I think it would depend on the level of the violations. As I say, we're just hearing and watching the websites that have been launched, the GoFundMes that have been launched, the pictures of busing in that has occurred. And so there's obviously a process we'd have to go through to make sure that there is procedural fairness. But I would hope that those candidates that have been identified for having an active recall petition, I'd hope that the elections officials would contact them soon, would give them some direction on how they can start raising money so that they can be authorized to do so, and allow them to use their candidate accounts, because we just established legislative framework so that that candidates are able to raise money for the candidacies. It seems absurd that those very basic procedural issues have not been resolved. So those are things that we're looking at. We're hoping that the elections officials are able to provide some clarity, and if not, we may have to step in and provide some greater clarity.
Thank you.
And we'll take one more from the mic and then try and take a couple from the phones before coming back to the room. Go ahead.
Hi Premier. David Winnick, Western Standard. Are you becoming less optimistic about getting a new pipeline deal done in light of the recent budget?
I would say that there's a lot of spending in that budget, and I've read different accounts of it. I mean, I think that there are some who say that if it is all spent on in productivity improvements, then I think we'll all benefit. That's what we're trying to propose. We know that every single government is in dire straits, maybe the federal government more so than any of us. But we're running a deficit this year, too. I don't think there's a single province that's running a surplus. And that should tell us something, that we have increasing demands on social services, and revenue isn't keeping up. And revenue's not keeping up because we're chasing private sector investment away. So I'm still working with the federal government to see if we can come up with a memorandum of understanding so that we can get a bitumen pipeline to Asian markets, as well as the Pathways project, as well as remove some of the bad laws that will allow for that investment to occur. So I hope to have more to say next week before Grey Cup.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we'll take a couple questions from the phones here. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Chris Varco with Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Hi, Premier. Just to follow up on that last question, I'm wondering what your reaction was specifically in the budget to some of the proposed changes to the federal emissions cap and the Bill C-59, which your government has been quite critical of in the past.
I would I mean, I have said from the time I got elected that we were putting forward an emissions reduction and energy development plan, which we did in April of 2023. And I have encouraged the federal government to work with us on developing a 2050 target, because, you know, that's a long enough time horizon that you can make sure that you don't have stranded capital, that people can make investment decisions today and ensure that they're going to get their money back, that you have time for the technology and innovation to develop. And so I'm encouraged that the federal government seems to understand that we're approaching that with goodwill. We intend to make sure that we're investing in that pathway. And as a result, we have to make sure that we're not impairing the ability of these companies to do those kinds of investments. I was just speaking with a company that had intended to do an AI data center with natural gas power in our province. But because of the net zero power regs, that would have meant that their operation would have to be 95% abated by 2035. They said, I can't guarantee that. That's not long enough time horizon, not only to get our money back, but the criminal penalties are too harsh. And so how many other projects don't we know about that got canceled for the same reason? And I just, we had 10 bad years of chasing private investment away. I don't want to have 10 more bad years. So I'll work with the federal government. Hopefully we can get aligned on a 2050 time horizon. And as I mentioned, we'll hopefully have more to say before Grey Cup.
Just to follow up on that, you've targeted doubling oil and gas production, and specifically you've talked about growing oil production to 8 million barrels a day by 2035. What makes you think that is achievable right now, and how do the policy changes that are being proposed help or hinder that?
Well, I can tell you that there has been a sea change in the conversation about oil and gas development that I think began a couple of years ago when we had delegations from OPEC and Saudi Arabia and UAE come to our World Petroleum Congress. I seem to recall my messaging being very similar to what I was hearing from those jurisdictions, that the world is going to need to have more reliable and affordable energy as we bring the impoverished nations of the world up to our level of standard of living. And so what I'm seeing is that more and more what the forecasters are looking at what OPEC has said, that we're likely to have a need for 123 million barrels a day of oil. I can tell you that the conversation around gas, they're now talking about it being a foundation fuel, not a transition fuel. They're talking about energy addition, not energy transition. That's the language that is happening on the international stage. And so Canada needs to catch up, because I think that there has been an understanding that we've got to make sure that people are taken care of, as well as dealing with emissions on a longer time horizon. If it is indeed the case that we're going to go from 104 million barrels a day to 123 million barrels a day, I want Alberta to have a greater share of that growing market. And I think that that's good for our friends, it's good for our allies to be able to have a reliable partner, and that's what we'll be working towards. So if we can get rid of some of the bad laws, I have a lot of optimism that we'll be able to build pipelines in virtually any direction.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. We'll take one more from the phones and then come back to the room. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Morgan Black with Global News. Your line is now open.
Hi there, this is a question for the Premier. With news that Matt General will resign from the House of Commons and then the floor crossing from the Nova Scotia MP, do you feel this shows dissent in the Conservative caucus and with their leader?
I don't know enough about the dynamic. You'll have to ask somebody who's involved in the Conservative Party federally.
But it is a long-standing Alberta MP that is on his way out, so I'm wondering how challenging that would make it for your government to keep the ear of Ottawa when you're pushing for all of those changes you've been mentioning that you're hoping to see on a federal level.
We make sure that we talk with all political parties. Right now, we're having regular daily conversations with the current government. And whenever I go to Ottawa, I make sure that I meet with other political parties so that they know what our perspective is. But I don't know enough about the details of why those two individuals made the decisions they did.
All right. Thanks, Morgan. And we'll come back to the room. Go ahead next to the mic.
Phoenix from City News. Madam Premier, this question is for you, and apologies because it's a little off topic. Minister Dreeshen has been quoted as saying that there's a possibility of a pilot project for the QE2. That being an increase of 110 kilometers to 120 kilometers. My question for you and for the government is, how did the government come to this point that they're considering something like this?
Well, it won't surprise you that Devin Dreeshen is not a huge fan of photo radar and not a huge fan of what appears to be fishing holes. So that's, I think, what his motivation is do we have roads that have been constructed that could tolerate a higher level of speed, but because the speed is not set to what the road allowance is, we're ending up with people getting tickets, getting slowed down, and problems as a result of that. So I think that's what part of the motivation was, is if the QE2 has been built and rated for 120 kilometers an hour, why aren't we letting people drive 120 kilometers an hour? If a lot of the frustration on that road is that you've got semi-vehicles trying to pass each other, blocking the lanes, why don't we have a law in place that the semis have to be over on the far right so that it allows for clear passage? So it is a pilot project. We're going to be monitoring very closely to make sure that we don't end up with any problems, any additional accidents or collisions. But I think I think most people would look at that and say, if you can do it there, maybe there's other places you can do it. So that's what he's doing. He's doing it as a pilot project. And we'd be more than happy to hear feedback from others if they think that there's a mismatch between the way the road has been built and what the posted speed limit is.
And we just heard that there's a survey in place right now, I believe till December 5th.
Correct.
Follow-up question. You've traveled that road many, many times, Madam Premier, and let me ask you this candidly. Have you ever gone beyond the speed limit while you're traveling those roads?
Fortunately, I don't drive anymore for everyone's sake, and I'm going to have to probably go and get some retraining when I do end up going back on the road again. I think that I think most people who've driven that road, I think that they have an intuitive sense that 120 kilometers an hour is probably the right speed.
Thank you. And we have time for one last question. We'll come to the mic here.
Hiren Mansakani with the Post Media Calgary. What is your response to the Alberta Teachers Association's legal challenges to the invocation of the notwithstanding clause, which invalidated 10 sections of the Charter rights that provide important constitutional freedoms? Well,
as I said before, I think that the right to strike was established in 2015 in a legal decision that was quite different scenario than what we're facing today. In Saskatchewan, there was a legislation that came in that declared essential services, but then didn't give an option for how to resolve. And so that's, I think, the circumstance where the court said, you've got to honor the collective bargaining rights. And we do. That's why we tried to bargain at the table. And then when the bargaining ended up falling, when it was not successful, the teachers went on strike, and we kept on asking them to come back to the table, and they didn't. So I would ask you, maybe I'll direct you to the recent Canada Post decision, because they ordered the postal workers back, and then there was a very long, year-long process about whether or not they had the right to order them back, and the Labour Board said yes. So at the federal level, they have ordered a number of different unions back to work over the last 20 years or so. So I do believe that the jurisdictions have the right to have their labor unions return to work. And we were a little bit concerned in this particular case, because we've got hybrid negotiations, that if we ended up resolving the provincial strike, we could have still ended up having 61 local strikes, because we have two different tables. And so it was a unique situation, not obviously the one that would have been our first choice. We would have preferred for the strike to have ended with a negotiated settlement. It didn't, and so this is our response to it. We had told the teachers that we had heard loud and clear that we needed to address issues of complexity. We know that there's a different way for us to be able to address complexity. One of the things that we were looking at and will look at here is what's happening in Saskatchewan. When Saskatchewan had their labour dispute, what they've set up is specialized classrooms. And there are no more than 15 students with one teacher and 2 education assistants. And from some of the reports I'm hearing, they're pretty happy with that kind of approach. So that's the kind of issue that you have to deal with, not at a bargaining table with an arbitrary pupil-teacher ratio, but through the kind of collaboration that we're announcing today. So we're having this announcement today so that teachers, the ATA, can see that this is a good faith motion that we're taking to try to solve the very serious issues that they've raised.
And there have been several organizations, associations that have taken issue with the way Bill 2 was enacted, especially by restricting the debate period to 1 hour, squeezing all readings on the committee stage within 24 hours. What is your message to those who are concerned about the erosion of democracy in Alberta?
Well, democracy is when the elected officials make decisions. Democracy is not when unelected judges unilaterally make decisions. So let's be clear about what democracy is. And that is the reason why we are asking the courts to be a little more constrained, because there are areas that fall very clearly into the realm of elected officials. Us making a judgment that children are being harmed and their rights are being violated because they've been out of school in 3.5 years, that is the job of elected officials to make. And if we've got it wrong, then we'll hear about it at the polls. But if we've got it right, then we've got a lot of kids who are back in the classroom, and I think that's a good thing. So let's be clear. Unelected judges making decisions without any oversight and without having to go to the people to get the democratic endorsement of their view, that's not democracy. When elected officials make decisions, that's democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.